All right. So good evening, everybody. You're with Jeffrie Moir, the Wizard. So tonight is March the 9th, 2020. So night of a full moon. We've got a full worm moon. So I know many of you right now are performing various full moon rituals. And for those that are performing rituals tonight, I would like to know what kind of a ritual you're performing, how you're performing it, and why you're performing it. So please feel free to leave comments below. Or you can always shoot me an email. Email is jeffriemooirwizard@yahoo.com. Check the description of the video for that email. So I'll be honest, guys. This is probably like the fifth or sixth reattempt at trying to record this. So something that's really bugging me right now. I'll just get it out there in the open. Get that over with first and foremost. This is something that I am encountering more and more. Particularly with Norse pagan groups. Now, if you are using, I'd say, honestly, using the occult to further a white supremacist agenda, it's like we all know that that's happened. That happens. I mean, hell, it's like you go to the History Channel or, look up documentaries on Netflix or whatnot, you're going to see, like, Hitler and the cult and whatnot all over the place. But if you're trying to hijack a movement like the Ace of True or Odinism or whatnot to further a white supremacist agenda or further any kind of discriminatory, prejudiced, homophobic, sexist, Islamophobic, whatever agenda, go fuck yourself. I hope you die, I hope you get cancer in your ass, and I hope your dick rots off. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. So we have a little bit of a theme going tonight. We have some questions that are largely related to dreams and sleep paralysis. So first question that I'll go into here is from Earth Mama, who's a Virgo. And she asks, why don't I dream? And why do I still remember my nightmares from childhood vividly? I think these two go hand in hand, honestly. So this is something that I'd say we're going to be going down into the realm of needing some action, needing to seek actual counseling on this. This has early childhood trauma written all over this. So nightmares in particular, it's usually a way that our brain is trying to process trauma that happened. So nightmares from childhood. Keep in mind, the dream realm tends to be a world that's entirely governed by your right brain. So anything that's left brain, this is why you're going to find that people talk about in their dreams, there's common themes like mechanical things don't operate the way that they should. It's not possible to actually read a book without the letters getting all jumbled around. Electronics don't work. Funny thing is, in my dream, and I found other people have experienced this themselves, elevators are death traps. They never take you to where you need to go. Just take the stairs. So your brain is going to use wild imagery, symbols, archetypes, things like that in order to try to process things that actually happen in real life, especially things that you may be trying to suppress. Now, as you get older, not being able to dream at all when, as a child, you had these really vivid nightmares, I'm thinking these are going hand in hand. Those dreams, in and of themselves, are traumatic, and so your brain is now suppressing and trying to push those dreams and the capability for any further dreams further into the back of your mind. So even if you are dreaming at night, when you wake up in the morning, you're going to have no recollection of them because it's ingrained. It's programmed now. Dreams are associated with trauma. Trauma is something to be repressed. So if you're looking to get past this, something that I would recommend looking into, it's what they call rapid eye therapy, or something like rapid eye therapy, rapid eye movement therapy. Now, people that I know that have done it say that it's very traumatic. They'll make you relive a lot of those past traumas, things that you might not recognize were there. But now you're in a situation where you're better prepared to be able to face what actually happened and and to come to terms with it and make peace with it and let it go. So that might be something worth looking into if you want to regain that ability to be able to remember dreams. But keep in mind that's going to be a very difficult path, and I'm not like a licensed psychologist or anything like that, so that's just my opinion. I'd say start with seeking out somebody that's actually like a licensed psychologist, but rapid eye therapy might be something worth looking into for that situation. So next question we have from Kitty, who's a Capricorn, and she says, I'm interested in hearing more about sleep paralysis. That's something that's always fascinated me. Now, I mentioned previously that I suffered with sleep paralysis as long as I can remember. So, a few things that I've learned about it since then. When I was a child, raised in a very religious household, so I was raised to believe that I was just plagued by demons, that Jesus was going to be coming back, at any day, and that I was specifically targeted by Satan because I was part of the last and final dispensation, and I was going to be on the front lines, when Armageddon happened, fighting against evil. Yay. So, yeah, we've all seen how, that's worked out. Jesus hasn't come back, and I've had to get a day job. So, yeah, thanks, you bastard. So what happens scientifically for those who aren't entirely familiar with the process? And I'll try to spare as much of the scientific mumbo-jumbo as possible. But we know when you're drifting off to sleep, a few things are happening. First, before you hit your REM cycle, brain starts releasing melatonin. This is going to be the chemical that actually makes you sleepy, that actually makes you tired. Then, once you hit the REM cycle, that's when you have what we call the GABA and glycine receptors, and those are what paralyze the body. So, if these didn't activate once you hit your REM cycle, then you'd be physically acting out things in your dreams, or actually screaming out things that you're saying in your dreams or whatnot. So you can see a connection here, because when those don't activate, that's when we have sleepwalking, sleep talking, things like that. So it's kind of an important function. So, and then we know that the brain releases certain chemicals during the REM cycle. Oxytocin, serotonin, kind of dumps those chemicals. There's debate as to whether or not there's such a thing as natural occurring DMT, which causes a hallucinogenic effect, which makes you dream. But we know that all of these chemicals are flooding your system, and this is what makes you have dreams. So what happens during a sleep paralysis episode is that those receptors trigger, and your brain manages to dump all of those chemicals before you've hit the REM cycle. So either that, or there's cases where you're in a dream and you wake up and those receptors aren't responding. So trying to wake up after a traumatic dream or whatnot, and it takes a little while for those receptors to catch up, and so your people report feeling paralyzed or whatnot after trying to come out of a nightmare. So you have these chemicals that your brain is releasing. Your body's paralyzed, and you're not fully in your REM cycle yet. So now you're starting to go into a full-on panic attack. And thus, the horrific demonic attack experiences. There's common themes that we see behind these. A lot of stories about shadow men, demons, cryptids, alien abduction experiences. And when we dig deeper into a lot of these stories, we'll see that a lot of them share commonalities, and it's going to be I was drifting off to sleep, and then all of a sudden, bam, there's like these bright lights coming through my window, and there's like this lizard man standing in my room, and he jumped on my chest and he started choking me and blah blah blah. And so, but yeah, the being unable to move, feeling short of breath, feeling like you're being choked. These are very common. Also, like the shadow man. One of the common themes that people say that they experience there is feeling like they're having their soul sucked out of them. So when they come out of it, well, what they don't understand is your body is in shock when you're coming out of it. So you are going to feel drained. You are going to feel like something just tried to pull your soul out of you. And it's going to take you a while to recover from it because you're recovering from shock. Now, there are some curious things that we see in a lot of sleep paralysis episodes where I have some questions. One of these are, when we take a look at the different stories of what people experience, we see common themes with things, like people reporting alien abduction encounters and whatnot. That didn't really start happening until the book Communion came out, and then was later propagated with Fire in the Sky and other things like that. And then previously we see like stories where people are talking about aliens and their encounters, and there used to be a variety from like Martians with antennas on their head to lizard men to things that look straight up demonic. And then after Communion and after Fire in the Sky, it's all the same reports. It's, you know, the gray aliens with the big bulgy black eyes. So we see that I'd say probably the most, you know, from the different surveys and whatnot that I've seen, the most common thing that people experience is what they call the shadow men. So these are dark, shadowy figures that always seem to have a very malevolent, evil presence about them. And people usually say that the feeling that they get from them is that they're there specifically to invade their body, to steal their souls and to drag them to hell or wherever. But the interesting thing is, like, we see how a lot of these experiences are all kind of related based on our exposure to media and things that we may have seen that caused an emotional reaction somehow that stuck with us, and now we're reliving that when we're having these panic attacks in the middle of the night. But when we look at stories regarding the shadow men, this is something that goes back ages and ages and ages, long before we had the exposure to media that we have. We look at like old exorcism stories and whatnot, where it's pretty much the only people that had any kind of access to any kind of media were the priests and the monks, the people who were actually writing things down, and the things that the people were saying that they were experiencing. These were like villagers that really didn't have access to anything other than maybe their next door neighbors and what the preacher was telling them on Sunday. But one of the common themes that we see with the shadow men is people who experience these shadow men encounters, eventually they have an experience with what they call the man in the hat. All the recent stories about the man in the hat is usually a silhouette of this character's typically smaller than most of the other shadowy figures, but is obviously in charge. Isn't doing any of the attacking himself, but seems to be commanding the other shadowy figures. Recent stories, he's going to be wearing a suit and a fedora. Earlier stories, like when we take a look at the Victorian era, the like 1890s and whatnot, some of the stories that we were hearing there, it was either a top hat, well, especially like during the Jack the Ripper era, there was a lot of theories that somehow Jack the Ripper wore a top hat, and there was an association there with these sleep paralysis experiences, the man in the hat, and Jack the Ripper somehow. So a lot of people in that locality were seeing a man in a top hat. Other areas, it was a man in a derby hat. In the Americas, a lot of people were saying it was like a cowboy figure in a cowboy hat, and so on and so forth. Going back further, It's whatever the headdress of the time that's appropriate. That's how this person appears. And this is a reoccurring theme that we see, like I said, from before people had access to media and before these ideas could go viral like they do now. So I'd kind of like to know where it actually started, what it actually is, and so on and so forth. But kind of going further from there, so say the most common thing that people experience in sleep paralysis is going to be an attack of some kind. And that's because they're having a panic attack. Now, what happens when they're able to control that panic attack response? Now, this is something that's either learned over time, just from being exposed to these kind of experiences time and time again, or found there's various different drugs that can help with this as well. One that they put me on for a while that worked for me, but doesn't work for everybody. In fact, a lot of people report that it actually makes it worse for them, was called Prazosin. So with Prazosin, in my experience, I found that turning off that panic attack response when I was having a sleep paralysis episode led me to be able to experience very vivid lucid dreaming episodes, which is another thing that people responded that happens to them when they have a sleep paralysis experience. So definitely not as common as some kind of a physical demonic attack or whatnot, but usually the people that report that this has led to lucid dreaming are people that have had a lot of experience with sleep paralysis and have typically suffered for a long time with those attacks before they get to this stage. And then the final stage seems to be eventually out-of-body experiences, astral projection, things like that. Which sounds a little bit crazy, but I'd say I've run the gauntlet at this point, and even though I try to, it's like my default is to try to default to a skeptical scientific explanation, there are a lot of experiences that I have had that I would say we can look at it, and people that are willing to entertain certain ideas would say that was definitely an out-of-body, like, astral projection experience. So, but I tend to kind of break it down like this. There's what I believe, and then there's what I entertain. So, at this point, what I believe is that which we can actually prove. That which we actually have a process to be able to dissect the empirical evidence, to be able to test and experiment and get the same result, and which has to pass peer review for us to be able to say, we know this to be a fact because of X, Y, Z going backwards. And there's that which I'm willing to entertain, which is the things that we really don't know. We really don't have an explanation for. And various things that I've been willing to entertain where I'm getting consistent results are things like astrology. Now, people in the more skeptical communities tend to say that astrology is bullshit. And the way that it works most of the time is by being so incredibly vague that it could apply to anybody. Now, when you're simply going off of like weekly horoscopes or something like that, sure, the messages are vague. They can apply to just about anybody. Or even if you're doing like a breakdown of your natal chart online, all of those messages are going to be copy and paste, very generic, could apply to anybody that has these kind of placements. But if you ever work with an actual astrologer who's able to take a good look at your natal chart and see how things connect, how different aspects interact with each other, and be able to break that down and explain it to you, it's like, well, it's kind of terrifying, like how much information and how much somebody can know you right off of the bat just by knowing what time you were born and where you were born. So that, like I said, I've seen enough empirical data at this point that I can't believe it entirely because it hasn't passed peer review, but it is something that I will continue to entertain. And it's kind of similar with a lot of angles of various different things in the occult and whatnot that I tend to play around with. These are things that I'm willing to entertain. These are things that I'm willing to experiment with. Commonly, I'll see if I follow the instructions as they're written, as the old masters and whatnot wrote them down, I get the same results. So, but, like I said, it's like there's no peer review to the process or anything like that, so I can't say for sure I hardcore believe in this, but I have ideas, and I'm willing to entertain the absurd. So, kind of going from there, another question we have from Robin, who's a Pisces. And she says, will the person troubling my mind be appeased? So with this, I want to say, really, I've got a Pisces and a Cancer here, and their questions are kind of along the same vein. And so this is kind of a general message to all water signs right now. So I'm seeing a theme here, and you all need to make sure that whoever you're getting involved with, or whoever's troubling your minds or whatnot, ask yourself if your efforts are being managed. And you guys need to start cutting some ties where things aren't reciprocal. So, really, every one of us has a limited amount of fucks to give. And water signs in particular, they tend to be very generous with where and who they give them to. Taking in a lot of strays, like wanting to give the whole world a hug and tell everybody it's going to be okay and whatnot. But we say, especially with the next new moon cycle, a lot of you really need to look at rituals and things that you can do to start purging yourself from this dead weight, this clutter that you're carrying with you, these useless people that don't do anything for you anymore, that are just taking up space in your head without giving anything back to you. So you said, will the person troubling my mind be appeased? So it's like I drew a card for this one just to kind of get an idea of what the person that's troubling your mind is going through right now, and the card that I got was Death. So this person is going to be going through a lot of monumental changes right now. So this in particular might be somebody that you just need to be willing to let go of. Whatever it is that they're going through, whatever it is that they're trying to process, they're going to be a completely different person by the time that they're done with this journey. And you got to ask yourself, is there room for me once this transformation is over with? Is this somebody that if you stick it through with them, that they would do the same for you if you were ever in that situation where you were going through a monumental change? Like, if not, then you need to cut ties there. It's like, this is a person that isn't doing you any good any longer. And whether or not they'll be appeased, that's not your problem. That's entirely up to them. That's their problem. That's something that they're going to have to deal with. And if they're successful in their journey, in the end, they will be appeased. But they will be a completely different person. So the next one I have is from Mizzy, who's a Cancer. And she says, I've had a pair of vivid dreams about a friend that asks me to please see them. I'm worried about them. Most of my divination comes in dream form, but the squish I have on this person makes me wonder how much of this is my gift and how much is projection. So with this one, I'll say, always trust your gut. So if your intuition tells you that you need to check on somebody, check on them. It's like, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I never get bothered by somebody messaging me or calling me or whatnot and saying, hey, just you came across my mind for some reason, so I just felt like I needed to check on you. Hey, how's it going? So, trust your gut. It's like, whether or not you've got a squish on them or not, put that in the back of your mind. It's, ask yourself, with this, is this something that could be actionable? And if not, it's like, would I be comfortable being involved with this person's life in a capacity where that's off the table. But one way or another, if your gut is telling you to check on them, check on them. So, that's all for tonight. Once again, if you guys have any questions you want me to address in the next episode, feel free to leave them in the comments below or send me an email. But that's all, and have fun with your full moon rituals and whatnot.